Well, folks, we have started the 24th season. This is going to be a very short one. I think I'm gonna try and do a better one with encompassing a little more both from this race and Jeddah that's coming up in Saudi Arabia. So I'll keep this one brief. I'll just kind of, it won't be more. It's less of a race report and more along the line of just my feel for what the season has to offer. Um, I think a lot of things are yet to be established, but in general, I think obviously Red Bull has continued their form. Um, I'm not going to exaggerate the victory that Max had in the sense that I do believe this particular track, Bahrain here, is is very well suited to the Red Bull. The surface, the very high degradation of this surface, and the fact that the Red Bull is particularly kind to its tires, I believe, and that it was also quite cool, unseasonally cool. I think a number of factors combined to make it look better than it is. Meaning it's already great. The RB20 is clearly, like a spaceship. But I don't think the margin is necessarily truly representative of what we're going to see. That remains to be seen, of course, but that's my opinion. I think a lot of things kind of came together in their favor that made the result seem even better than it really could have been or should have been. Um, I mean, they're traditionally race strong and quality, not weak, but not as strong. And we saw that again this time. The wisdom of their strategy, both from a technical standpoint, from design by Newey, and in terms of race setup from the engineers and race strategy, is is consistent. They tend to focus on race pace as opposed to qualifying pace and or one lap pace, then, for want of a better term, and that again showed. So they weren't really that great in qualifying. Yes, they were on pole, but not by a big margin, and yet within the first few laps, 10, 12 seconds, boom, like that. um Having said that, I'm on record as saying this whole thing about Checo and Max having different cars is nonsense. I think the Red Bull car is designed somewhat around Max, as rightly so, as the lead driver and the faster driver. Nothing is wrong with that. Every team does that or should be doing that, and if they don't, then they're stupid. But I think that it's the same car. It's just better suited to Max, but it's not any different. And the fact that Perez, who is a good driver, I mean, we tend to look at Perez and kind of forget how good a driver he is because of how devastatingly effective Max is. And when you look at the relative comparisons, it makes Perez look bad. But he really isn't. He's a good driver, and he's able to successfully beat the other people who are also good drivers: the Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell, etc., Norris, and so on, Alonso, everybody, the whole crew. I mean, these people are not, in Formula One, there are no bad drivers, right? There's some that are better than others, but there are no bad drivers. The worst guy, the guy at the end of the pack, is still a great driver. Have no illusion about that. And yet Max is able to just absolutely wipe the floor with Perez in the same car. And really and truly, he is an extraordinary talent. I mean, I'm not a fan of him personally, and I'm also on record for saying that. But I'm a racer, and I'm telling you, this dude is out of this world. And a remarkable statistic I saw was some sector times from, I think, lap 19 to lap 27 or something. I don't remember exactly now. But he was like within 2 or 3 hundredths of a second of each lap, each sector, over like 8 or 9 laps. That is an astounding feat. I mean, that we say these things and see these things with him, and it almost is, we almost kind of take it for granted that he's going to do these things, but you shouldn't. This is an extraordinary thing that we're seeing. It's not a joke. This dude is the real deal. He is wow. I mean, there was a time when I thought maybe he was a little overhyped and overrated when he was driving. When Mercedes was more dominant, and he would win the odd race and push against them as really the only person who was really making any inroads. And I thought to myself, maybe there was some hype, maybe he was just lucky sometimes, or maybe the circumstances just were right. But I'll tell you what, he is good, and he's getting better. The thing that's, I think, should be anyway worrying to the competition is he's not at his peak. This guy is very young and he's getting better. He's improving. It's not this nonsense about, oh, it's the car. No, it's not. The car is great, but it's not the car that's producing that kind of result. It's not. It's him, right? This dude is way, way out there in talent. He's really good. I know that will be a controversial view, and a lot of people, especially on the Hamilton side of things, will disagree. But if you're a motorsport fan, and especially if you yourself have some racing experience and understand what it's like to drive a car fast in competition, this dude is serious. He ain't no joke. The In general though, my overall view of what I've seen, I thought Hamilton had a better race than Russell, even though the results didn't seem to indicate that, because ultimately Russell fell back 2 places, Hamilton gained 2 places. That's a difference. Meaning, even though Russell, I mean, obviously Hamilton, I don't know what on earth happened in qualifying. I mean, he I don't know what he did there, but he screwed up. I mean, even the best screws up sometimes, and he definitely screwed up there. But because I don't buy this whole thing about setup. The setup thing is nonsense. I think that's a bullshit excuse. And I also think that the story about the broken seat, somehow it didn't sit right, pun intended, it didn't sit right with me, because a seat in a F1 car is an integral part of the safety mechanisms and the safety systems. It's just one part of it with the harness and everything else. And if the seat is broken, genuinely broken, that car should be stopped immediately, because that's a life-threatening failure if the car was in an accident. In other words, if you have a broken seat and you have a severe enough impact, that is life-threatening. And hence, something is fundamentally wrong if the team and the FIA who monitoring those radio conversations didn't step in and act there. So I have a challenge with what he said about the broken seat. That didn't make sense to me, and I just have to conclude that it was just BS, because I cannot believe that if it really was broken, that they wouldn't have stopped him. So something is wrong there. But in my opinion, he still did better than Russell, even though he finished lower down, because he gained positions, whereas Russell lost positions. McLaren was a disappointment to me, out of the top 3, because based on how they finished last year, I had expected some of that pace to carry over. Now, again, this particular track is possibly one of the least favorable to their setup. They're definitely a high-speed oriented car based on their aero and downforce, and hence maybe this is not representative. I mean, I'm assuming that I'm going to see a big step up in Saudi Arabia, because it's a much higher speed track, but and a much lower degradation surface, and teams that have cars that maybe are a little harder on rear tires, I'm expecting will do a lot better in Saudi Arabia. But having said that, I just expected a little more from them. maybe we'll see. Maybe that will change. But I was a little disappointed. Ferrari, what a conundrum. Again, this is gonna be short, so there's a lot more that I think needs to be said about Ferrari, and whether Hamilton going there is a good idea, whether dropping signs is a good idea. Um, just generally what they're doing, if it's a good idea. Um, they tend to be a one step forward, two step back kind of team traditionally. Um, Still early. The car does seem better, and the feedback from both Leclerc and Sainz indicates that. And I don't think Sainz, this being his last year and being fired unceremoniously, would be pulling any punches and trying to BS, about whether the car is good or not. So the fact that he seems genuinely confident in the car indicates that they've made a good step, particularly in the weakest era that they had, which is tire wear. I mean, that was always their problem. They could qualify very well, often better than Red Bull, but race pace was just a disaster after a few laps. The tires would just eat their tires, and that would be the end of it. Almost like a Haas, but just at a higher level. So I'll say a little more about Ferrari when I see what they do on a track that's a little more neutral and allows them to show their pace a little more. But that's about the car. In terms of the team and politics and driver and so on, I have my views on that, but we'll see. Aston Martin did well as expected, but again, you kind of get the feeling that it's a over promise and under deliver. Now, having said that, I guess early last year, the start of the season where they were really flying, probably created a false impression that would have continued on. But I still was hoping for a little more from them, to be honest with you. But again, I'll wait. I mean, it's very early and it's a long season. I mean, 24 races is crazy. So there's going to be a lot of time for development to take place, for changes to take place, for even new directions if necessary to take place. So we'll see. Alonso, I think, is still motivated. I'm hoping that Stroll, by the way, drove very well. Again, I'm not one of the proponents of, hey, Stroll is an ass. I actually don't think he's a great driver, but I don't think he's as bad as people make him out to be. And I've said that before as well. And this, came from dead last, I think 20th up to 10th into the points. You can't argue with that. That's good driving. Consistent, kept his head down, didn't screw up. And I mean the incident that set him back wasn't really his fault either. It was, I thought Hulkenberg screwed up. So that wasn't bad. That was a good run by him. Haas did well, I thought. I was quite impressed with Haas. And again, going back to the high deg of this track, which is their Achilles heel traditionally, the fact that they were able to do well on a high deg track, which is probably where they would be the weakest, is a very good sign. I actually think Hulkenberg and Magnussen is not a bad driver pairing. Not the best, but at a Haas level, you're not gonna attract the best anyway. But the fact is, they're solid, and Hulkenberg proves that he can put the car, up into, he can maybe produce results that are a little outside of what the car should be capable of. He can outdrive the car a little bit sometimes. With a Haas, that's a relatively low bar for a car, so a good driver should be able to outdrive it. But still, he did it, and that's what needs to be done. So more power to him, and has made a good step. I'm very encouraged by what I see from Haas. Williams, I think I was looking for a little more. Vols has now been in charge for a year. I was hoping to see a little more, and I'm a big Albon fan. Sargent, I kind of tired of him now, but Albon, I'm a huge fan of Albon. I really want to see Albon in a good car. And I was hoping that Williams would have delivered not a car to challenge for the top, of course, but certainly a much better step for the midfield. Um, and I kind of not seen that again early, but I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that there'll be a good development path for Williams because I think Albon deserves a good car to drive. Um, Alpine, wow, that's just a team in disarray. I'm inclined to say that they should just sell to Andretti. I thought the Andretti decision by F1 was disgraceful, fundamentally disgraceful. The reasons given were farcical, to say the least. And it would be nice if via the back door, by buying into a team as opposed to starting a new one, that maybe they can still get in. Because I think at this point, Renault needs to just call it quits. Again, those of us who have been watching motorsport for many years, not just Formula One, motorsport, know that, and this will probably annoy some people, but it's just my view, that the French are notorious for being they're probably the only set of people I think that are worse than the Italians when it comes to stupid internal politics and bad decisions and just I don't know things that just don't make any sense. I think Alpine has gone backward instead of forward. I mean, I didn't think Otmar, that guy Safnauer, was a particularly good team principal last year, and I'm not even saying he shouldn't have been fired. But I don't think that was where the root of the problem was. I think the root of Renault's problem is one, their engine sucks, and they seem to have two different camps. They seem to have a chassis camp in England at Enstone, and then they have a engine camp at Vary-Châtillon in France. And there almost seems to be a rivalry, and the French are obviously going to be trying to assert the French side of it is going to assert its dominance because they're the owners of the team. And I just think it's a mess, and I think the drivers are getting caught up in it. I'm not an Ocon fan. I think he's an asshole. I don't like him, but he can drive. Uh, but Gasly, I think, deserves a better car. I think Gasly can do better. He's shown good driving skills once in a while, but the car is just crap. I think this Alpine is a joke. It's slow in a straight line. It's just crap. Can it be developed? Sure. Will it be? I'm not going to hold my breath. Doesn't mean I won't have a couple good results, but overall, I just don't see anything coming from them. Probably one of the big disappointments is this new stake, whatever they call it, Alfa Romeo, previous Alfa Romeo team. Based on Bottas' feedback a little earlier in the testing period over the winter, I got the feeling that the car was going to be a lot better. It didn't look great. I actually thought Zhu did pretty well. A lot of people don't like him, but I actually think Zhu is pretty good. And I'm not even sure if this probably is controversial. I'm not even sure if Bottas is any better than him. So I actually think Bottas and Zhu are. I don't know. I don't think Zhu is bad, but I think the car is crap. AlphaTauri, boy, or Red Bull, whatever they call it now. Red Bull Cash App Visa. What a mouthful. Ricardo. I'm a Ricardo fan. I like Ricardo. But I'm beginning to think that he's kind of past his sell by date now. Doesn't mean he can't produce good results when the right opportunity presents itself. But I'm not sure if he's really able to capitalize on opportunities when they do present themselves. I think Yuki is actually a better driver. His head is not settled. I mean, what he did after the race on the cooldown lap, in my opinion, was nonsense. In fact, I actually think he should be sanctioned for that. But in terms of his driving, I actually think he's better right now than Ricardo. I actually think if all things being equal, Yuki will actually produce better results than Ricardo. And I think at some point they're gonna have the RB team is gonna have to recognize that they may have gambled a little wrongly on Ricardo. And they're not a team shy of switching drivers mid-season. And even though Ricardo came with a lot of hype and more than likely with a lot of sponsorship as well, and some experience which RB needed badly, um, I think maybe they should have stuck with Lawson and Yuki, and maybe they still should. Maybe if Ricardo does not improve and start to consistently beat Yuki for the rest of the season, I would not be surprised if you heard that he was replaced by Lawson at some point during the season, because Yuki is inexperienced and Ricardo is vastly more experienced and vastly more. He brings a lot more to the table, and you're supposed to see him leading the team, producing the results. Instead, it's the other way around. So yeah, I don't know. I think that they may have put their money on the wrong horse there, but yeah, again, we'll see. So basically, to sum up, RB I think is gonna win again. Maybe not by as big a margin as sorry, Red Bull, not RB, because RB is now what they call the what previous Alpha. Red Bull is gonna win again, in my opinion, based on this what I've seen at the start of the season. I think Max is gonna win the championship again. More power to him. I think he is deserving of it because I think he's the best driver right now on the track. And I think Red Bull will deserve it because I think they're the best team on the track. And I believe in racing is a meritocracy, and I'm not into the politics crap. Who is the fastest and who does the best job deserves to win. It's as simple as that. And I think Mercedes is good, better, clearly better than the last couple, but not necessarily good enough. I'm not convinced that they're going to be challenging Ferrari this year because I think Ferrari is the one who's made the biggest step. If Ferrari cannot shoot itself in the foot every race, I think they'll actually be the closest challenger to Red Bull. McLaren, we'll see. As I said, the track might not have suited them. I'm hoping they'll do better. And basically, everybody else is just the best of the rest. I'm maybe McLaren, maybe RB, and maybe Haas. We'll see. I think Alpine and Stake are gonna be fighting for last place. But let's see what next week brings. I'm looking forward to it, and maybe we can do a more in-depth race analysis then. All right.